The penthouse was silent, save for the hum of the climate control and the distant, rhythmic pulse of the city lights against the floor-to-ceiling glass. Vera stood by the counter, her hand still hovering over the receiver of the landline. The dial tone, a flat, electronic drone, seemed to mock them. Dae-ho walked to the window, his silhouette dark against the neon backdrop of the harbor. He didn't turn around. His shoulders, usually a fortress of calm, were rigid. You don't understand, Vera. You treat the world like a patient on a ward. You see a problem, you cut it out, you stitch it up. But the bratva? They aren't a sickness. They are a funeral. Vera wiped her hands on her apron, a nervous habit she hadn't quite kicked despite being out of the diner for weeks. I didn't invite them into our lives, Dae-ho. They called us that if they want to play games, let them. They don't play games, Dae-ho said, finally turning. His eyes were cold, void of the warmth she had seen just hours ago. They trade in consequences. By hanging up, you just cost me every shipping lane between here and Vladivostok. They've locked the ports. My legitimate assets, the tech, the logistics, it's all frozen. The elevator dinged. It was a sharp, intrusive sound that echoed through the penthouse like a gunshot. Minjun stepped out, his face pale. Behind him walked a woman who moved with the predatory grace of a snow leopard. She wore a tailored charcoal coat, her hair pulled back so tightly it looked like a mask. Elena. Dae-ho, she said, her voice like grinding ice. She didn't look at the decor or the view. She looked directly at Vera. And you must be the nurse. I hear you have a very sharp tongue. Elena walked to the center of the room, placing a slim, black tablet on the marble coffee table. She tapped the screen, and a cascade of financial data, red lines, frozen accounts, and seizure orders filled the room. I am not here for a war, Elena said, sitting gracefully. I am here for an audit. Dae-ho, you are trying to be a businessman, a philanthropist. You're playing at being human. But your foundation is built on blood money, and blood has a way of clotting. We are here to dissolve the clot. Vera watched them, her eyes darting between Dae-ho's frustrated hands and Elena's posture. She noticed it then, a flicker, a slight, involuntary twitch in Elena's left hand as she reached for her glass of water. It was subtle, rhythmic. The woman tried to suppress it by gripping the glass harder, her knuckles turning white. Vera stepped forward, her professional instinct overriding the danger. You're in pain. Elena froze. Excuse me. The tremor, Vera said, her voice steady. It's not just stress. It's neurological. Compression in the C-spine, most likely. It's causing referred nerve pain that you're trying to mask with heavy-duty analgesics. That's why you're here, isn't it? The Russian doctors said it was incurable, so you decided to collect your debts before the clock runs out. The air in the room vanished. Dae-ho looked at Vera, stunned. Elena's mask slipped, just for a fraction of a second, revealing a raw, terrifying vulnerability. You have 6 months, maybe less, before you lose the use of that arm, Vera continued, stepping closer. And once the motor function goes, the bratva will replace you. You aren't here to audit Dae-ho. You're here because you're desperate for a legacy that doesn't involve being discarded. Elena stood, her hand shaking violently now. She pulled a silenced pistol from her coat, pointing it directly at Vera's forehead. You are very clever, nurse. But clever people usually die first. Dae-ho stepped between them, his own weapon drawn. Touch her, and I burn your entire organization to the ground. Audit or not. Vera didn't flinch. Shoot me, and you die in agony, Elena. Or, let me fix you. I can perform the decompression. I need a clean clinic, and I need you to sign over the frozen assets. A life for a ledger. The clinic was a sterile tomb located on the city's industrial outskirts, a place where Dae-ho's unofficial affairs were handled. The white lights were blinding, reflecting off the chrome instruments. Vera scrubbed in, her breathing rhythmic. She looked at Elena, who was strapped to the table, sedated but conscious. Stay still, Vera whispered. Outside, in the lobby, the atmosphere was chaotic. Dae-ho stood by the double doors, his men scrambling to form a perimeter. The Russians are coming, Minjun reported. They aren't here for the audit. They heard Elena was going rogue. They're here to clean the slate. Hold the line, Dae-ho commanded, his voice dropping an octave. No one enters that room until Vera is finished. The lobby became a slaughterhouse, Dae-ho moved with a terrifying, efficient lethality, a stark contrast to the quiet focus occurring just 20 feet away. Inside the ore, Vera's hands were steady as stone. She navigated the nerve bundle with the precision of a watchmaker. She wasn't just a nurse anymore. She was the architect of their survival. Almost there, she muttered, the sweat stinging her eyes. Dae-ho, Min-jun screamed from the corridor. The back entrance. They've breached the cooling system. The lights flickered, dying for a heartbeat before the emergency generators hummed to life, bathing the room in a sickly, pulsating amber light. The sound of gunfire grew louder, closer. Vera pulled the final stitch, her heart hammering against her ribs. She taped the dressing down and stepped back, pulling off her mask. She's stable. Get her out. Elena's eyes fluttered open. She looked at her hand. It was still. For the first time in years, it was perfectly, beautifully still. She looked at Vera, then at the door where the sounds of Dae-ho's war were closing in. You did it, Elena whispered. She reached into her coat, pulling out a small, encrypted drive, the master key to the Russian accounts. She tossed it to Vera. The assets are yours. Now, get out of here before my men find out I'm not dead. The escape was a blur of smoke, screeching tires, and the metallic tang of blood. They reached the penthouse as the sun began to bleed over the horizon, painting the city in shades of bruised purple and gold. Dae-ho sat on the edge of the velvet sofa, his white shirt ruined, his chest heaving. He looked at Vera, who was standing by the balcony, watching the city wake up. She was covered in dust, her hair matted, but her gaze was sharp, alive with a fire he hadn't seen before. We won, he said, his voice raspy. We survived, she corrected. The elevator doors opened. Lady Kong stepped out. She looked at the blood on the floor, then at the encrypted drive in Vera's hand, and finally at her son. You look tired, Dae-ho, she said, her voice dripping with disappointed malice. You've spent the night playing surgeon and soldier. You think you've bought peace? You've only made yourself more valuable to the people who want to tear you down. She walked over to Vera, placing a cold, heavy hand on her shoulder. You saved a Russian life tonight, Vera. You proved you are not just a weakness. You are an asset. And in this city, assets are either bought, stolen, or destroyed. Lady Kong pulled a thin, black folder from her hanbok. She opened it to reveal a photo of Vera's apartment building, now fully renovated, and a new contract. The Oshis have aligned with the Bratva. They've decided that if they can't break Dae-ho, they'll break you. They are coming, and they don't care about your nursing school or your cat. Vera looked at the folder, then at Dae-ho. She walked over to the table and picked up the heavy, cold metal of the pistol Dae-ho had left there earlier. It felt heavier than the skillet, heavier than the lamb leg. You want me to be a Mafia wife? Vera asked, her voice dangerously quiet. I want you to be a survivor, Lady Kong replied. Vera looked at Dae-ho. He started to reach for her, but she stepped back, her eyes narrowing. The nurse was gone. The woman who hung up on the head of the Russian Bratva was staring at the gun in her hand with a strange, dark clarity. I won't be a target, Vera said, looking at the door. And I'm finished being a guest in this life. She raised the gun, not at Lady Kong, but at the window, shattering the glass with a single, deafening shot that echoed into the morning air. If they want a war, Vera said, turning to Dae-ho, then let's give them one. The shattering of the penthouse window wasn't just a sound, it was a declaration. The wind roared into the room, tossing the curtains like ghost limbs. Lady Kong didn't even blink, though the glass shards skittered across the floor like diamonds. Dae-ho was on his feet in a heartbeat, his hand finding Vera's waist, pulling her behind the cover of the marble kitchen island. Vera, what are you doing? He hissed, his voice a mix of terror and newfound, savage respect. I'm changing the leverage, she snapped back. She pointed the gun toward the shattered window. Outside, on the rooftop of the building across the street, a red laser danced. The sniper who had been watching them for hours was now exposed by the sudden influx of light and the lack of stealth. Min-jun, Dae-ho roared into his comms. Drop the north rooftop. Now, the sound of a heavy caliber round ripped through the room. Vera's ears rang, but she didn't duck. She watched as the red dot across the street vanished, replaced by a plume of smoke and the dull thud of a body hitting gravel. Lady Kong stepped over the broken glass. her silk slippers crunching on the debris. She looked at Vera with a terrifying, twisted smile. You didn't just break a window, girl. You invited the world to watch our downfall. Or our rise. I invited them to see who they're dealing with, Vera said, her voice dropping. She walked over to Lady Kong, the pistol now hanging loosely by her side. You wanted me to prove I wasn't a weakness. I just took out your best security threat while you were busy reading me bedtime stories about the Bratva. Dae-ho stepped between them, his eyes searching Vera's. He saw the shift. The woman who wanted to be a nurse was still there, but she had been tempered in the fire of the last 24 hours. She was no longer afraid of the blood on her hands. She was calculating how to use it. We need to move, Dae-ho said, grabbing his coat. The police will be here in minutes, and the Oshis have the precinct commissioner in their pocket. This penthouse is a tomb now. Where to? Vera asked. The shipyard, Dae-ho replied. Where it all started. It's the only place we have left that isn't connected to the Syndicate's legal accounts. It's a war zone, Vera. Are you sure? Vera looked down at the encrypted drive Elena had given her, the key to the Russian accounts. She tucked it into the hidden pocket of her gown. I'm not going to the shipyard to hide, Dae-ho. I'm going there to finish the audit. The drive to the docks was a high-speed nightmare. The city felt different tonight, claustrophobic, dark. As they pulled into the industrial sector, the giant cranes loomed like skeletons against the moonless sky. Min-jun met them at the gate, his arm in a makeshift sling. Boss, the Oshis are already here. They've locked the perimeter. They know we have the drive. How? Dae-ho asked, pulling a long-barreled tactical rifle from the trunk of the car. The leak, Vera whispered, looking at Min-jun. Her eyes narrowed. Min-jun, you were the one who told me the leak was the manager at the diner. But you were the only one who knew about the apartment address. The air grew heavy. Min-jun's hand drifted toward his holster. I did what I had to do, Min-jun said, his voice devoid of emotion. The Syndicate is dying. The Russians offered a payout that would last 10 lifetimes. Dae-ho, you were going to dissolve us anyway. I chose survival. Dae-ho didn't hesitate. He pulled his weapon, but Vera was faster. She didn't use the gun. She threw the heavy, solid brass encrypted drive at Min-jun's temple with the force of a professional pitcher. The drive caught him square in the eye. He stumbled, dazed, and in that split second, Dae-ho surged forward, slamming him against the corrugated metal fence. We are not dissolving, Dae-ho growled. We are evolving. He knocked Min-jun unconscious and turned to Vera. That drive was your leverage. You just used it as a projectile. Vera walked over, picked up the drive, and wiped the blood off it with her sleeve. It's encrypted, Dae-ho. I copied the files to my cloud server the second we got in the car. You think I'd trust a piece of plastic to hold our future? Dae-ho stared at her, a genuine, mirthless laugh escaping him. My mother was wrong. About what? She said you were the light. She was wrong. You're the storm. Suddenly, the shipyard lights flickered on, illuminating hundreds of men in black tactical gear. The O'Shea brothers walked out from behind a shipping container, flanked by a dozen Russian enforcers. Liam O'Shea stepped forward, clapping slowly. End of the line, Chairman. Give us the nurse, and maybe we'll let you die quickly. Vera stepped out into the light, alone. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a woman who had just walked off a shift at the hospital after a double, tired, focused, and completely, utterly dangerous. You want the nurse? Vera called out, her voice amplified by the shipyard's PA system. I'm right here. But you'd better hope none of you get hurt. Because I'm the only one here who knows how to keep you alive. And tonight, I'm feeling very, very negligent. She looked back at Dae-ho, who was waiting in the shadows, weapon raised. Ready to finish the audit, Chairman? Dae-ho pulled the bolt of his rifle back, the sound echoing like a death knell. Always Vera. The shipyard erupted into chaos. The shipyard was no longer a place of industry, it was a theater of war. The sound of the O'Shea brothers' men opening fire was like a hailstorm against the rusted metal containers, but Vera didn't flinch. She had moved past fear and into a state of cold, clinical calculation. Vera dove behind a stack of shipping crates just as a bullet sparked against the steel inches from her head. She knew the shipyard. She'd spent years delivering orders to these docks in her early days before the diner. She knew the blind spots, the ventilation shafts, and the way the shadows played against the cranes. Dae-ho, she shouted over the roar of gunfire. The crane. If we can get to the control deck, we can block the main gate and cut off their reinforcements. Dae-ho, moving with a predator's grace, laid down covering fire. He was a blur of black cloth and controlled aggression. Go. I'll draw their fire. Vera sprinted. Her lungs burned, but her feet were silent. She reached the ladder of the massive gantry crane, her hands slick with grease and adrenaline. As she climbed, she saw Liam O'Shea below, barking orders, his face twisted in a mask of desperation. He was terrified. He knew that if the drive went public, his family's influence would vanish overnight. While Dae-ho fought a defensive war on the ground, Vera reached the control cabin. She didn't just operate the crane, she weaponized it. She swung the massive steel arm, loaded with a dangling shipping container, like a wrecking ball. It smashed into the convoy of O'Shea's armored vehicles, flipping them like toys. The explosion was deafening, a shockwave that knocked men off their feet. But she wasn't done. She saw a group of Russian enforcers moving toward Dae-ho, who was pinned behind a forklift. Vera spotted a container labeled with chemical hazard warnings, the facility's industrial cleaning solvents. She aimed the crane's secondary cable, hooked the container, and swung it high, directly over the Russians. With a single, well-placed shot from her pistol, she ruptured the seal. The caustic mist rained down, blinding the attackers. Dae-ho didn't waste a second. He neutralized the threat with surgical efficiency. With the O'Shea's forces scattered and the Russians retreating into the dark, Liam O'Shea found himself isolated. He stumbled back, his expensive suit shredded, his eyes wide as he saw Dae-ho and Vera approaching. "It's over, Liam," Dae-ho said, his voice quiet. The Mafia boss was gone. In his place was a man who had finally shed his burdens. Liam spat blood on the pavement. "You think this ends? You're a ghost, Dae-ho. You and the girl. You can't run forever." Vera stepped forward, her face illuminated by the flickering yellow light of the shipyard. She looked at Liam, not with hatred, but with a strange, clinical pity. "I'm not running, Liam. I'm doing exactly what I do every night at the hospital. I'm prioritizing the critical patients. And you? You're a liability." She held up her phone. "The drive? I didn't just copy it to the cloud. I sent it to the district attorney, the international banking regulators, and every major news outlet in the city. By sunrise, your family won't have a penny or a name left." Liam collapsed to his knees. The power he held had been erased by a few keystrokes. The sun began to crest over the horizon, turning the harbor into a sea of liquid fire. Dae-ho walked over to Vera. The violence was over, leaving a heavy, ringing silence in its wake. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, not from the fight, but from the realization of how close he'd come to losing her. "We have to go," he said. "The police will be here in minutes. The Russians will be coming for the survivors." Vera looked at her hands. There was blood on them, but she didn't wipe it off this time. She looked at the city, then at the man who had become her entire world. "I'm not going to run," she said. "If I run, I'm still their victim. I'm going to walk out of here. If they want to try us, let them. We aren't the shadows anymore, Dae-ho. We're the people who bring the light." She turned and began to walk toward the main gate, her steps steady. Dae-ho watched her for a moment, the woman he had tried to protect, who had ended up protecting him. He holstered his weapon, adjusted his coat, and fell into step beside her. As they reached the edge of the shipyard, a fleet of sirens began to wail in the distance. The city was waking up, oblivious to the fact that its underworld had just been dismantled by a nurse and a boss. Vera stopped, turned to him, and for the first time in 2 days, she smiled, a real, genuine smile. "I think I'm going to be late for my shift." Dae-ho laughed, a sound of pure, unburdened relief. "I'll drive." As they disappeared into the morning fog, the encrypted drive still glowed in Vera's pocket, a reminder that they hadn't just survived, they had won the city.